Welcome to Science for Sleepy Minds. Tonight, picture the room you're in as a small warm island of light, and beyond it a quiet ocean of night. Somewhere out there, stretched across the dark, the Milky Way hangs like a pale thread of smoke, soft and steady, as if it has always been there. And here is the gentle contradiction that makes it interesting. A galaxy can be unimaginably vast, yet it can keep its story so quiet that you only notice it when you slow down. What is that story made of, if not words and not sound? Where does a galaxy write its past? And how can we read it from inside, like someone trying to understand a forest while standing among the trees? In this episode, you'll start to notice a hidden pattern, a calm kind of order, and the little clues that make the Milky Way feel like a book made of light. You don't need to stay awake for all of it, and you don't need to remember everything. By the end, if you're still listening, you'll have a simple, soothing picture of how the Milky Way holds its memories in shape, in shadow and in slow movement. If you're tired, you're in the right place. You can let your eyelids be heavy. You can let your thoughts wander. This is not a test, and it's not a race. It's more like sitting beside a calm window, watching something beautiful pass by without needing to catch it. We're going to move gently tonight. We'll start with what you already know, even if you've never said it out loud. We'll begin with the simplest view of the Milky Way, the way it looks from Earth, and then we'll slowly step into what it really is. Not in a sharp way, not in a complicated way, just in a steady, quiet way, like walking down a hallway with soft lights. And if you fall asleep, that's perfect. The science can keep going without you. It can become background music for your mind. You're allowed to drift, and the story will still be here. If you enjoy this kind of calm science, you can like or subscribe and then let that thought go like a small leaf floating downstream. Now, get a little more comfortable if you can. Let your shoulders settle down as if they have been carrying a coat you no longer need. Let your jaw loosen, just a little, so your teeth are not trying to hold the day together. Let your forehead smooth out like you're gently ironing a wrinkle in fabric. Take a slow breath in your own time and let it out. Another slow breath in and out. You don't have to count. You don't have to do it perfectly. Just notice that your body already knows how to breathe, even when your mind is tired. As you breathe out, imagine you're letting go of something small. Not a big problem, not a whole story, just a pebble. A tiny pebble you didn't realize you were holding. Each exhale, another pebble drops away. Your hands get lighter, your chest gets softer, your thoughts have a little more space to spread out and rest. If you want to, let your attention travel down through your body like a warm, slow light. Down from the top of your head, through your full face, across your neck and shoulders. Let the muscles around your collarbones soften. Let your arms feel heavy, supported by the bed. Let your fingers unclench, even if it's only by one small degree. Then let your attention move to your chest and belly. You don't need to change anything, just notice. The gentle rise, the gentle fall. Then down through your hips and legs, all the way to your feet. Let your legs be quiet. Let your feet stop trying to help. Let the bed do the work of holding you up. Tonight, we'll keep the pace slow and smooth. I'll repeat important ideas in different softer words, not to drill them into you, but to rock you into comfort, like a lullaby for curiosity. Now, imagine yourself somewhere peaceful under the night sky. It could be a hill outside a town where the air feels clean and cool, or a balcony where the night is still and the world seems to hush itself. Maybe there's a blanket around your shoulders. Maybe you can hear a faint breeze in the leaves, or the faraway whisper of traffic that sounds more like ocean noise than anything urgent. Above you, the sky's not empty. It's full, but in a quiet way. And across that darkness, the Milky Way appears like a soft brushstroke, pale smoke on dark velvet, not bright like a spotlight, not sharp like a neon line, more like a gentle smear of light, as if the sky has been softly chalked. If you've ever looked up and felt a slow, wordless awe, you already know the feeling we're following tonight. Because the Milky Way, that milky stripe, is not a cloud. It's not a thin mist close to Earth. It's a view through our own galaxy, seen from the inside. It's many, many stars, gathered together in the distance with dark dust drifting between them, making shadows inside the glow. And that's where our quiet story begins. Because the Milky Way carries a kind of memory. Not a memory like a mind remembers, more like a landscape remembers. Like a riverbed remembers where water has flowed. Like a tree remembers its years in rings. The Milky Way remembers in patterns. Patterns of where stars gather. Patterns of where gas collects. Patterns of where older stars drift and where new stars begin. So here's the gentle guiding question we'll hold tonight, like a warm mug in your hands. If a galaxy could keep memories, where would they hide? Would they hide in its shape, in its shadows, in its slow turning, in the paths its stars take as they move, almost imperceptibly, around the centre? We'll answer slowly with the simple steps, like reading a book by moonlight, one quiet line at a time. So first, let's make sure we know what we're looking at. When you look up at the Milky Way, you might imagine it as a long line of stars painted across the sky. But what you're really seeing is depth. You're looking through a thick part of our galaxy, where stars are more crowded together from our point of view. It can help to imagine the Milky Way as a city of lights, not a city on the ground with roads and buildings, but a city in space where each light is a star. From far away, a city looks like a glowing cluster. From inside the city, you don't see the shape so easily. You see streets, you see corners, you see a few lights near you, and then the rest blend together into a distant haze. We're inside the Milky Way's city, and because we're inside it, the galaxy doesn't look like a neat spiral from our perspective, it looks like a band. A long, curved glow that wraps around the sky. Now we'll add one gentle science word, and we'll keep it friendly. A galaxy is simply a huge family of stars, gas and dust, all held together by gravity. Gravity is the gentle pull that keeps things together. We'll talk more about it soon. For now, you can think of it like a quiet hug that never turns off. It's what keeps planets near stars, and stars moving in long paths around the galaxy. So the Milky Way is our galaxy, our star family, our cosmic neighbourhood. It contains stars like the Sun, and stars much smaller, and stars much larger. It contains clouds of gas, so thin you could never breathe them, and dust so fine it drifts like smoke. It contains dark spaces and bright spaces, busy regions and calm regions. And when you look at the Milky Way in the sky, you're seeing a slice of that neighbourhood, seen edge on from the inside. Now, even though we can't easily see the whole shape from within, we can still talk about it in a simple way. The Milky Way is shaped a bit like a slow pinwheel. It has a centre, and it has arms that curve outward, like soft spirals. But it's important to picture those arms the right way. They are not hard, solid structures, like metal spokes. They are more like regions where stars and gas tend to gather more often, like gentle lanes in a moving crowd. And that brings us to a soothing, sleepy thought. Even very large things can have soft boundaries. A coastline is not a sharp line if you zoom in close. It becomes sand and pebbles and shells fading into water. The Milky Way is like that too. Its spiral arms are not crisp lines. They are gradients. They are tendencies. They are patterns that look clear from far away, but feel gentle from within. Being inside the Milky Way is like being inside a forest. If you've ever walked among tall trees, you know that from the ground, You can't easily see the forest's full shape. You can't see the curve of its edge or the way it spreads. You see trunks and leaves and shafts of light. You sense patterns, but you don't see the whole map. And yet the forest does have a map. The Milky Way does too. Scientists learn that map by watching how stars move, by measuring light, by listening to signals that don't reach your eyes, and by noticing where the galaxy is thick and where it is thin. But tonight we won't rush to the complicated tools. We'll keep it simple and gentle, as if we're making a quiet sketch with a pencil. So imagine that pinwheel shape again. Now imagine you are standing inside one of the arms, not at the very centre, not at the far edge, just somewhere along a curve like a person standing on a spiral staircase looking along the railing. From there, if you look along the arm, you see many lights lined up. If you look away from the arm, you see fewer lights. That difference, the crowded direction and the less crowded direction, helps create the bright band we call the Milky Way. So the first piece of the story is shape. The galaxy's shape guides where things tend to be. It tells us where the crowd is denser. It hints at how the galaxy has grown and changed over a long time, and the story is silent because the shape doesn't speak. It just is. It just holds patterns. It holds history in the way a worn path holds history. Now once you have the shape, you can begin to notice what the story is written with. Because a story needs ink, and in the Milky Way the ink is not one thing, it's a blend. A soft mix of brightness and shadow. The first kind of ink is starlight. Starlight is familiar even if you've never thought about it. It's the tiny sparkle you see in the night. It's the glow that reaches your eyes after travelling through space for a very long time, arriving quietly without sound. But the Milky Way is not only written in light, it's also written in dust. To make dust feel gentle and familiar, think about a sunbeam in a quiet room. Maybe you've seen it in the late afternoon, when the light slants in and catches floating specks. The dust drifts slowly. It spins. It hovers. It looks almost peaceful, like tiny snow in warm air. Space dust is not exactly like household dust, but the idea is similar. Space dust is made of very small grains, tiny pieces of material, often like little bits of carbon or silicate, the kind of stuff that can form rock. These grains are so small you wouldn't hold them in your fingers. You would barely notice them one by one. But in space there can be huge regions filled with them, drifting along between stars, and dust is something very important. Dust blocks and softens light. It doesn't always erase it completely. Sometimes it dims it or changes its colour, or makes it look smeared and hazy. Dust can act like a gentle curtain. This is why the Milky Way has dark lanes. If you've looked at photos of the Milky Way, or if you've seen it in a very dark sky, you might notice that the bright band has streaks of darkness running through it. Not just empty space, but defined shapes of shadow. Those are places where dust sits between us and the stars behind it, making pencil-like strokes across the glowing page. So the second piece of ink is shadow. And shadow in the Milky Way is not frightening. It's simply information. It's a sign that something is there gently in the way. In a calm sense, shadow is like handwriting. It shows you where the dust is, where the galaxy has thick drifting lanes. And dust lanes often sit in places where the galaxy is doing something interesting, because dust and gas like to travel together. That brings us to the third kind of ink, gas. Now, when you hear gas, you might imagine something you can smell, or something that rushes out fast, or something that feels sharp. But in space, gas is usually extremely thin. It's spread out like a faint mist, not like a cloud you could scoop, more like the thinnest fog you can imagine, stretched across huge distances. A gas cloud in space simply means a large region filled with gas, often mostly hydrogen. Hydrogen is the simplest element, the lightest kind of atom. You don't need to picture atoms tonight. Just picture hydrogen as a very basic building block like plain flour in a kitchen, ready to become many things. These gas clouds can be calm for a long time. They can drift, they can swirl, they can spread out, they can collect slowly in some areas, becoming slightly thicker. And here is the soft wonder in that. These clouds are often the places where new stars can begin. They are like quiet nurseries. So when we look at the Milky Way's glowing band, we are not only looking at stars, we are also looking at the places between stars, the material that can become future stars. We are looking at the past and the future mixed together in one calm stripe of light. This is one reason the Milky Way feels like a story. It contains chapters that are still being written. Now, if you're still awake, notice how gentle this is. We've only needed a few ideas so far. A galaxy is a family of stars. The Milky Way has a shape like a slow pinwheel. It's written in light, and it's also written in shadow because dust makes lanes across the glow. And it's written in gas, the thin mist that can, over time, become new stars. If any of that feels fuzzy, you don't have to hold it tightly. You can let it float. You can let it sink in slowly or not at all. The tone matters more than the details tonight. Now, with that calm picture in mind, we can begin the next gentle chapter. Star birth. Not as a dramatic event, not as a loud moment, but a slow gathering. A helpful way to imagine star birth is to think about fog. Sometimes the air feels clear, and then slowly fog begins to thicken. At first it's barely there, then it becomes noticeable, then it becomes a soft veil across the landscape. Starbirth begins in a similar mood. A region of gas and dust begins to gather. Not instantly, not sharply, just gradually. Little by little, the material becomes more concentrated in one place. What causes that gathering? Here comes one simple, important word, and we'll treat it gently: gravity. Gravity simply means a pull between things with mass, a quiet attraction that draws them together. On Earth, gravity is what keeps you in bed instead of floating toward the ceiling. It's what keeps oceans in their basins. It's what gives weight to your blanket. In space, gravity is still there, working softly. In a gas cloud, gravity can help bring gas closer together. And as gas gathers, gravity becomes a little stronger in that region, pulling more gas in. It's not a harsh pull, it's gradual. It's like a slow invitation. As the gas collects, something else happens. When you squeeze something, even gently, it can warm up. So as gas becomes denser in the center of a gathering cloud, the center can slowly heat. In time, if the gathering continues, the center becomes warm enough and dense enough that a star begins to shine. You can think of it like this. A star is a place where a cloud's quiet gathering becomes a steady glow. The glow is not random. It comes from deep processes inside the star, where tiny pieces of matter interact in ways that release energy. We don't need the detailed mechanics tonight. For now, it's enough to know that when a star is born, it becomes a stable source of light and warmth, held together by gravity, shining for a very long time. And the place where stars are born has a gentle name, a nebula. A nebula simply means a cloud in space, often a place where stars can form. If you've seen pictures of nebulae, they can look like soft watercolor paintings in the darkness. Blues, pinks, faint glows. But you don't need those pictures right now. You can imagine a nebula as a very large, very thin cloud with regions that are slightly thicker, like knots in fabric. Inside those knots, gravity works patiently. And so starbirth is not a sudden flash, it's a slow beginning, like a story that starts before you realize you're reading it. If you want a cozy image, picture a new star as a lamp being turned on in a distant house very far away, behind a curtain. At first you see a faint glow, then the glow becomes steady, then it becomes part of the neighborhood's light. Now, notice how this links back to the Milky Way's ink. Gas is ink because it can become future light. Dust is ink because it shapes what we can see, making lanes and shadows that mark where the material is. Starlight is ink because it shows us what has already formed, what is already shining. So the Milky Way's story is written in a cycle. Clouds gather, stars are born, stars shine. Over very long time, stars change, and the material they release can return to the galaxy, joining new clouds and beginning again. It's like shui breathing, but on a timescale so long you can't feel the inhale and exhale in a single night, but you can feel the mood of it, renewal, a calm kind of renewal. And there's something comforting about that, especially when you're tired, because your own life has cycles too. Rest and wake, tension and release, trying and letting go. So you can let the galaxy's slow cycle remind your body that it's allowed to rest. It's allowed to pause. It's allowed to do what it was built to do. Breathe. Now, before we go farther, let's settle the central idea again in very simple words, the way you might repeat a gentle phrase to yourself as you fall asleep. The Milky Way is our galaxy, a family of stars. From Earth, we see it as a soft band because we are inside it. The bright parts are many stars together. The dark lanes are dust making shadows, and the quiet clouds of gas are the places where new stars can begin. That's the beginning of the silent story. A story written in brightness and shadow, and in slow gathering. As you lie here, safe and warm, you can imagine that story continuing above you, not rushing, not demanding, just turning slowly. You might picture the Milky Way like a gentle wheel, rotating so gradually that no human eye would notice it in a lifetime. And yet it turns, it moves, it lives in a kind of patient motion. If you're the kind of person whose mind likes to chase thoughts at night, consider giving it a softer job. Instead of chasing, let it watch. Let it watch the idea of the Milky Way, calm and wide, like a quiet mural across the ceiling of the universe. What would it feel like to read a story that doesn't hurry you? What would it feel like to learn something without needing to hold on to it? Tonight, you can do that. You can listen as if you're listening to rain. You can catch a few drops of meaning and let the rest pass by. In a moment, we'll keep exploring the galaxy's ink in a little more detail, and we'll begin to connect star birth to the larger shape of the Milky Way. We'll move gently from what you can imagine easily to what becomes deeper, but never heavy. For now, take another slow breath in and let it out. Feel how the bed holds you. Feel how the night does not ask you to solve anything. And somewhere above, the Milky Way keeps its quiet page open with light and dust and mist, waiting to be read in the softest way. If you're still awake, you can let your attention come back softly, like a feather settling on a blanket. And if you're only half awake, that's even better. You don't need a sharp mind for this. You only need a gentle curiosity, the kind that can float beside you while the rest of you rests. A moment ago, we left the Milky Way like a quiet page held open in the dark, written in 3 simple inks: brightness, shadow, and misty material, starlight, dust, gas. And we began to watch one of the calmest beginnings in nature, the way a star can be born without any hurry. So let's return to that image, very slowly. Imagine a wide, thin cloud of gas and dust drifting through the galaxy. It isn't thick like a storm cloud on Earth, it's much thinner, more like a wisper of fog stretched across a huge distance. Most of it is empty space with tiny pieces floating inside it, and yet, even in something that thin, there can be little places where the cloud is a bit denser, like a soft knot in fabric. Those denser places matter because gravity notices them. Gravity, which simply means a gentle pull that brings things together, begins to tug a little more strongly on a denser patch than on a thinner one. Not because gravity is being dramatic, but because there's a bit more material there. And over a long time, that tiny difference can grow into a larger change. More gas drifts toward the denser patch, more dust drifts with it. The knot becomes a little tighter, the cloud becomes a little more gathered, And still, nothing is loud, nothing is sudden. It's like watching frost form on a window, the pattern appearing quietly while you're not paying full attention. As that gathering continues, the center begins to warm. And this warmth is not like a flame, it's more like the warmth you feel when you rub your hands together and the motion concentrates energy. When a cloud is gently squeezed by its own gravity, the center can heat up as it becomes more dense. At some point, you can imagine the cloud center becoming like a small dim ember hidden inside cotton, a warm core still wrapped in dust, still tucked in the dark. In astronomy, there is a word for this early stage, a protostar, which simply means a baby star. A star that is still forming and not yet fully shining in a steady way. You don't have to remember that word, you can keep the picture instead. A warm center gathering itself, slowly learning how to glow. And around this forming star, the rest of the cloud doesn't always stay perfectly still. It can swirl, it can rotate, it can flatten into a gentle disk, like batter spreading in a pan or like a slow whirlpool that becomes smoother as it turns. That disk can be important later, because it can become the place where planets begin. But tonight we can simply hold the idea that starbirth is not only a point, it's a small, calm system taking shape. The star is not just a light, it's a balance. Gravity pulls inward, trying to gather the star tighter. But the warmth and the pressure inside the star push outward, like a steady breath. When those two tendencies balance, the star becomes stable. It shines steadily, not because it is forcing itself, but because it has found a quiet way to exist. And there's something soothing about that, if you think about it. A star is what happens when nature finds a calm middle point, not too loose, not too tight, held gently in place by opposing pressures that settle into harmony. So when the Milky Way writes new chapters, it often begins in these clouds, in these quiet nurseries, where gravity gathers material and warmth grows in the center. Now, if you zoom out again, you might wonder something simple. If stars are born in clouds and clouds drift through the galaxy, does starbirth happen everywhere evenly, like sprinkling seeds in every direction? Not quite. The Milky Way has patterns. It has regions where clouds are more likely to gather and compress, where starbirth is more likely to begin. And this is one of the ways the galaxy writes its story in a readable way. It doesn't write in straight lines, but it does write in gentle preferences. Before we move to those larger patterns, let's spend a little time with the stars themselves. Because once a star is born, it begins to leave a different kind of mark on the galaxy. It begins to write in light. You've already seen with your own eyes that stars don't all look the same. Some appear slightly bluish. Some look more golden. Some look faint and red. Even if you can't name the colours, you can sense that there's variety in the night. To make this feel familiar, think about a candle flame. A candle is small and calm, and yet you can sometimes see different shades within it. A bright white yellow near the hottest part, a softer orange at the edges. Colour and heat are linked in a gentle way. In simple terms, hotter light tends to look whiter or bluer, and cooler light tends to look more reddish. Stars are similar. A blue-white star is hotter. A red star is cooler. Not cool like cold to the touch, of course. Stars are always very hot, but compared to each other, some are hotter and some are cooler, and their colour gives us a clue. This is part of the Milky Way's silent story. Because if you look at a region of the galaxy and you find many bright blue-white stars, it often suggests something about youth. Blue-white stars don't usually live as long as smaller, cooler stars. They burn through their fuel more quickly. So when you see a group of them together, it can hint that starbirth happened there not too long ago, in the galaxy's quiet sense of time. Meanwhile, cooler red stars can last a very long time. They are steady and patient, like slow-burning lamps. There are many of them, and they can carry the galaxy's older memory. So when we speak of star age, we're not imagining birthdays and candles. We're using clues. We're listening to what the galaxy is quietly telling us through colour and brightness. A star's age is not written on its surface like a label, but it's hinted at by its behaviour and its neighbourhood. Young stars are often found near the clouds they formed from because they haven't had time to drift far. They can be surrounded by leftover dust and gas, like a room still filled with the soft mess of building something new. Older stars, over long time, can wander. They move around the galaxy in steady paths. They can spread out. They can migrate to calmer regions. It's a bit like people growing up and moving to different neighbourhoods, not from drama, but from the slow unfolding of life. The Milky Way has places that feel like bustling downtowns and places that feel like quiet suburbs, and stars can drift between them over the galaxy's long, slow rhythm. And this is another gentle way the Milky Way writes its story. It writes in layers. Imagine a tree trunk cut open to show rings. Each ring is a year, a record of growth, but the rings are all present at once. They don't disappear when the next one appears. They become a layered archive, a soft history stored in wood. The Milky Way is like that too. It holds many ages at the same time, new stars forming in cloudy nurseries, middle-aged stars shining steadily in calmer regions, older stars drifting like quiet elders, still glowing, still part of the family, carrying the galaxy's deeper past. So the galaxy is not one moment. It is many moments living together. And if you're the kind of person who feels overwhelmed by time or by everything you think you should be doing, this can be a comforting thought. The universe does not demand that everything happen at once. It allows stages. It allows seasons. It allows slow change. Now let's carry this calm idea back into the larger shape again. We said earlier that the Milky Way is like a slow pinwheel with spiral arms, and we also said the arms are not hard structures, but regions where stars and gas tend to gather more often. Here is a gentle way to picture it. Imagine a slow-moving crowd in a large open space. People are walking, not rushing. And in one area, perhaps near a doorway or a warm light, the crowd becomes slightly denser. Not because there's a wall, but because there's a tendency. People drift toward that region and pass through it. In a galaxy, something similar can happen with gas and stars. There can be a travelling pattern where material tends to bunch up as it moves around the galaxy. When gas bunches up, it can compress a little, becoming denser, and when gas becomes denser, star birth becomes more likely. So the spiral arms can be places where the galaxy encourages star birth, not by forcing it, but by gently shaping where clouds gather and squeeze. There is a science phrase for this travelling pattern, a density wave, which simply means a moving ripple of density, a region where material becomes more crowded as it passes through. You can forget the phrase if you want. Keep the picture, a slow ripple in a wide rotating disk. If you've ever watched ocean swells, you've seen something like this. A swell moves across the water, and as it passes, it shapes where foam appears, where waves rise, where the surface becomes textured. The swell itself is a pattern travelling through the water. The water moves and the pattern moves, and they are not exactly the same thing. In the Milky Way, stars and gas move around the centre, and within that movement, spiral patterns can exist like slow swells, shaping where the galaxy becomes busier, where clouds compress, where bright young stars appear and light up the arm like fresh sparkles. So when you look at the Milky Way band and you see brightness and shadow mixed together, you are seeing a map of this process. Bright regions can hint at many stars, including young ones. Dark lanes can hint at dust, often near dense clouds. And dense clouds can hint at places where new chapters may begin. In a calm way, it's like reading handwriting on a page. The bright strokes are the words that have already been written. The darker strokes are the ink pooled in certain places, and the smudges where the page is thick with material. And the most peaceful part is that the story is not written in what a thing is, but in where it gathers. This is an important sleepy-friendly idea. The Milky Way's story is often written in patterns of location. Where is the gas thicker? Where is the dust lane darker? Where is the star glow more crowded? Where do young stars cluster? Where do older stars drift? So you can imagine the galaxy as a slow dance floor. The dance is not chaotic, it's patterned. It's a waltz that takes a very long time to turn. Now, pause for a moment and notice something. When you hear the words spiral arms, it might sound like the galaxy has clear lines you could trace with a finger. But in truth, the arms are more like soft lanes. And because they are lanes of tendency, they can change, they can shift, they can be fuzzy at the edges. That fuzziness is not a flaw. It's part of why the Milky Way feels gentle when you really imagine it. It's not a machine with rigid parts. It's more like weather on a grand scale. Patterns moving through a wide disk, shaping where activity happens. So we've covered a few quiet chapters now. We've watched star birth as slow gathering inside clouds. We've noticed star life through colour as a clue about heat and age. And we've begun to see spiral arms as moving patterns that shape where new stars appear. If you're still awake, you might feel a small curiosity rising. If spiral arms are like gentle traffic lanes, and if stars are born in certain places more often, then the galaxy must have a kind of structure in its memory, a way of remembering where things have been busy and where things have been calm. Yes, and that brings us closer to the idea promised at the beginning. The Milky Way's silent story is stored in patterns, not in announcements. It's stored in shape, in shadow, and in motion. We've spoken about shape. We've spoken about shadow. Now let's begin to lean into motion in a way that still feels like sleep. Stars move. They don't zip around like sparks. They glide. They travel in long paths around the center of the galaxy. You can picture each star as a tiny boat on a wide, dark sea, moving along a current that curves around and around. This motion is so slow, and the distances are so large that from your perspective on Earth, the stars seem fixed. They seem like a steady ceiling, but they are not fixed, they are travelling. And sometimes they travel together. Stars are often born in groups from the same cloud. In the beginning, they can be close like a small cluster of lights, but over time, as they orbit the galaxy, the group can stretch. The cluster can loosen, the stars can spread along their shared path, forming a long, thin trail. There is a name for this, a star stream, which simply means a ribbon-like group of stars moving together through the galaxy. Again, you don't have to remember the term. Keep the image, a ribbon of starlight, a soft strand stretched by time, showing where a family of stars has travelled. If you've ever dragged your finger through sand and left a line behind, you understand the feeling. The line is not the finger, it's the trace of motion. It's the memory of where something went. Star streams are like that. They are footprints in the Milky Way, and in a quiet way they can tell us stories. They can hint at what was once a tighter group, now gently unfurled. They can hint at how the galaxy has pulled and shaped things over time, like hands slowly stretching taffy into a thin thread. This is where the Milky Way begins to feel even more like a written record. Not just a snapshot, but a diary of motion. Now, you don't need to follow every detail here. You can let the main thoughts settle like warm tea in your chest. The Milky Way remembers. It remembers through patterns of movement. It remembers through ribbons of stars. It remembers through where stars gather, where they spread out. And the comfort, again, is in the slowness. Nothing is rushing in this story. The galaxy takes its time. It writes with patience. It edits with patience. It turns the page without making a sound. So as you lie here, if your mind is still busy, you can offer it this gentle alternative. Instead of thinking about your own to-do list, imagine a slow ribbon of stars moving quietly through the dark. Imagine dust lanes like soft pencil marks. Imagine clouds like faint mist. Imagine the galaxy turning like a wide, calm wheel, never needing to hurry. In the next stretch of our night together, we'll continue following that ribbon idea. We'll explore how streams can come from star clusters slowly stretching out, and sometimes from smaller galaxies that had joined the Milky Way long ago, like gentle additions to the family. And we'll begin moving toward the crowded, quiet heart of the galaxy, the place where many orbits revolve, hidden behind dust like a lamp behind a curtain. But for now, you can take one more slow breath in and let it out. Feel the simple rhythm: light, shadow, motion, light, shadow, motion. And if sleep is already approaching, let it arrive the way the Milky Way writes its story. Softly, slowly, and without any need for you to do a thing. If you're still awake, you might notice how the last few ideas are already starting to blur at the edges, like chalk becoming soft on a board. That's a good sign. Your mind is loosening its grip. You don't need to hold the details. You can let them drift past you and keep only the calm feeling underneath. We were following the Milky Way's memory through motion, through the quiet fact that stars do not sit still even though they look still from here. They move in long, gentle paths around the center of the galaxy, like boats on a wide, dark sea. And sometimes those boats move together, not by accident, but because they began together. When stars are born, they are often born in groups. A single cloud can form many stars at once, like a handful of lanterns lit from the same flame. At the start, that group can be close, like a small cluster of lights. If you could float nearby, you might see them as a little gathering, shining through leftover haze. But time is patient, and gravity is steady, and the galaxy is always turning. As the group orbits the Milky Way, the stars do not all move in exactly the same way. The differences are small, but over a long time, small differences add up. Some stars drift slightly ahead, some fall slightly behind. The cluster begins to loosen the way a knot loosens when you stop holding it tight. And slowly the group stretches into a longer shape. That stretched shape is what we called a star stream, which simply means a ribbon-like line of stars that share a similar path. A ribbon of family members still travelling together, just spread out by time. If you want a gentle image, imagine a handful of glitter dropped into a slow current. At first it stays together. Then it elongates into a shining streak. The glitter did not stop being related. It simply learned how to spread. This is one of the Milky Way's quiet fingerprints. Because when you find a star stream, you're not only seeing stars, you're seeing the memory of togetherness. You're seeing evidence that long ago, those stars were closer, bound in a tighter group. The stream is a sentence written in motion, and there's another gentle way streams can form. Sometimes the Milky Way has gained stars not only through star birth inside its own clouds, but by slowly welcoming in smaller star systems over a very long time. You can picture this as a calm meeting, not a crash. Space is wide and everything moves slowly on these scales. So what we call a merger is often more like blending, like two slow currents joining into one river. A smaller galaxy can drift near the Milky Way. Over time, the Milky Way's gravity can begin to pull on it, not with a sudden tug, but with a steady influence. And the smaller galaxy can gradually stretch out the way a soft piece of fabric stretches when it's gently pulled. There's a word for this kind of stretching: tidal, which simply means pulled more on one side than the other. On Earth, tides happen because the moon's gravity pulls on the oceans, and the pull is slightly different on different parts of the Earth. In space, a similar kind of uneven pull can stretch a star system. So a small galaxy drifting near the Milky Way can be gently drawn out into long streams of stars. Those stars become part of the Milky Way's larger family. But the stream can remain as a trace for a long time, like a ribbon left behind. Again, notice the mood. Even when galaxies interact, the story doesn't need to be scary. In space, these changes can be slow and graceful. It's less like a collision of cars and more like two soft spirals of smoke drifting into each other in still air. So the Milky Way's memory is not only the memory of its own star birth, it can also be the memory of what it has gathered, what it has welcomed in, and how it has been shaped by the long, patient gravity of the universe. And from here on Earth, we can sometimes detect those memories by noticing patterns of stars that don't look random, streams that arc through the halo of the galaxy, groups of stars that share a similar motion, clues that whisper, quietly, "We were together once." If you feel your mind wanting to grip the details, you can relax your grip. Keep only this soft core. The galaxy remembers through patterns, and motion is one of its gentlest ways of remembering. Now, let's take that idea and carry it toward the center of the Milky Way, the part we might call its quiet heart. Most galaxies have a center that feels more crowded, simply because of shape, like a city that has a downtown with more buildings and more lights. The Milky Way is similar. Toward the middle, there are many stars, more lights, more overlap, more layers. If you could travel inward, you would see the sky filling with stars, like the darkness has less space to breathe between points of light. You might see bright patches and dense regions, and you would sense that you're approaching a place where many paths curve around a common middle. But from where we are, inside one of the spiral arms, the center is not easy to see clearly, and the reason is one we already know: dust. Dust sits between us and the center like a soft curtain. It doesn't announce itself. It simply blocks and dims the light behind it. So when we look toward the middle of our galaxy using ordinary visible light, the view becomes hazy and parts of it become hidden. That's why the heart of the Milky Way can feel mysterious. Not because it's trying to be secretive, but because our view is naturally filtered. Like trying to see a lamp through fog. You can sense the glow. You can tell something bright is there, but the details are softened. Still, science has found gentle ways to look through that curtain, and we can understand the idea without getting complicated. We learn about the Milky Way through different kinds of light, not only the light your eyes are tuned for. Your eyes mostly see visible light, the small slice of light that feels like normal brightness to us. But light comes in many forms, like a song can be played on many instruments. One of those forms is infrared, which simply means light that is like a gentle heat glow. It's the kind of light you feel as warmth, even if you don't see it. And infrared can pass through dust better than visible light can. So when we look toward the center of the galaxy using infrared, the curtain becomes thinner. We can see deeper. Another form is radio waves, which simply means very long, gentle light waves that can reveal cold gas in space. Radio waves can travel through dust too, and they can help us map parts of the galaxy that would otherwise be hidden. So in a quiet way, scientists read the Milky Way like someone reading a book with different lamps. Sometimes you use one lamp and the page looks a certain way, then you use another lamp, and suddenly the faint writing becomes clearer. The story was always there, you just needed the right light to notice it. When we look inward with these different kinds of light, we learn that the center is a busy place. Busy doesn't mean loud in sound, because its space is still mostly silent. Busy means there are many stars and much material, and many things are happening over long stretches of time. It's a region where gravity shapes motion strongly, where orbits curve around a dense middle. And in that dense middle, there is something that many people have heard of, and sometimes feel uneasy about: a black hole. Tonight, we will keep it calm and simple, because it can be calm and simple. A black hole is a place where gravity is so strong that light cannot easily escape from very close to it. That's all you need for now. It doesn't mean the black hole is a roaming mouth. It doesn't mean it's hunting. It doesn't mean it's coming for anything in your life. Far away from a black hole, gravity behaves like gravity always does. It's a pull, the same kind of pull that any massive object has, and our galaxy has a black hole in its centre. It's called Sagittarius A star, often said as Sagittarius A, but you don't need to remember the name. You can simply remember the idea, a quiet anchor at the middle. An anchor is a good image because it suggests steadiness. It suggests a centre point that helps shape the paths around it. And that's how to hold it tonight. Not as a frightening thing, but as a calm part of the galaxy's architecture. Also, it is very far away. You're safe in your bed. The black hole at the centre of the Milky Way is not a threat to your night. It's simply one part of the story scientists have learned to read. And even that story is told in gentle clues, not in shocks. So what does the galaxy's centre add to our silent story idea? It adds a sense of organisation. Many stars orbit around the centre. The galaxy's structure is shaped by how everything moves in relation to that middle. The centre helps define the turning, the slow rotation, the long paths that give the Milky Way its pinwheel nature. And the centre is also a place where we meet again with our earlier theme, layers. There are dense groups of stars, there is dust that blocks certain views, there are different kinds of motion, there are older stars and younger ones in different arrangements. It's like a library shelf where many books are stacked close together, and you can't pull them all out at once. But you can still sense the volume of history sitting there. Now, take a slow breath, in and out. Let your mind settle again into the simplest version of what we've said, because repetition helps you drift. The Milky Way writes its story in patterns. It writes in shape, like a soft pinwheel. It writes in shadow, where dust makes lanes across starlight. It writes in motion, where stars travel in long orbits and sometimes in ribbons called streams. And in the middle, it has a crowded heart, partly hidden behind dust, with a quiet gravitational anchor at its centre. If you forget everything else, that's enough. Now, let's widen the view a little, but keep it gentle. When we say the Milky Way is a galaxy, it might sound like a single object, like one thing sitting in space, but it's more like an ecosystem, a city, a living pattern of many parts interacting over long time. And because it is an ecosystem, it has ways of showing us what it's doing. Stars are not only lights, they are also furnaces of change. Over their lives, they transform simple material into more complex material, and they return some of it to the galaxy. Again, we won't go deep into the chemistry tonight, but the calm truth is worth saying. Some of the elements in your body were formed in stars that lived before the sun. This can sound big, but you can hold it softly. It means that long ago, other stars made some of the ingredients that later became planets and people and oceans. In that sense, you are made from old starlight's leftovers. You are part of the galaxy's long story, not separate from it, not outside it, inside it. And if you're lying awake with worries, this can be a comforting perspective, not because it erases your problems, but because it places them in a larger, calmer frame. The universe is not rushing you. The galaxy has been turning for a very long time, writing its quiet lines, and you are allowed to rest inside that bigger rhythm. Sometimes the mind relaxes when it remembers that it belongs. You belong to the Earth. The Earth belongs to the solar system. The solar system belongs to the Milky Way, and the Milky Way belongs to the universe's wide ocean of space. It's a nesting doll of belonging, and the story is not harsh, it's slow. Now, as we move forward, it can also help to notice that the Milky Way is not the only place we see patterns. Patterns appear everywhere at many scales. Spirals are a good example. You see spirals in shells, in certain flowers, in storms that swirl over oceans, in whirlpools in water, in the way cream curls into coffee if you stir gently. These patterns don't mean everything is the same. They simply remind us that nature likes certain shapes because those shapes can be stable. And stable shapes can be soothing to think about. So when you imagine the Milky Way's spiral structure, you're imagining one more version of a pattern the universe seems to enjoy, a smooth turning curve that balances motion and order. And now, there is one more gentle mystery we can place on the edge of the page, like a bookmark, not to make you anxious, but to give your curiosity something soft to hold. When scientists measure how galaxies move, they find something interesting. There seems to be more gravity than we can explain by the stars and gas we can see. In simple terms, it's like watching leaves float on a pond and realizing the water is being pulled in a way you can't fully account for by what's visible. This idea is often called dark matter, which simply means something we don't see directly, but we notice its pull through gravity. Notice what the phrase does not mean. It does not mean darkness is attacking. It does not mean there is a monster in the shadows. It simply means there may be something present that does not shine in a way our eyes can catch, yet it influences motion. So dark matter is a gentle edge of our understanding. It's a quiet unknown. We know some things about its effects because we can see how galaxies move and how they hold together. But we still wonder about what it is exactly, and that's okay. Science is allowed to have edges. You're allowed to fall asleep before reaching them. Not knowing everything can be peaceful, like leaving a bookmark in a book you love. The story remains waiting without pressure. So tonight, you can rest with what we do know, and let the unknown sit softly at the margin. We know the Milky Way is a family of stars, gas and dust, held by gravity. We know it has a spiral shape, a gentle pinwheel. We know it writes in light and shadow, in bright star bands and dark dust lanes. We know it writes in motion, in orbits and in star streams, like ribbons of memory. And we know that in the centre, behind a curtain of dust, there is a crowded heart with a quiet gravitational anchor. That is a full, gentle chapter of understanding already. Now let's begin easing toward a more dreamy rhythm. Because as we keep going, the information can become simpler and more repetitive and more like a rocking motion. You can let it carry you. Picture yourself drifting along one of the Milky Way's spiral arms, not flying fast, just floating. The arm is not a solid road. It's a region where stars are more common, like a softly lit neighbourhood. There are brighter clusters here and there, and darker lanes where dust cuts across like shaded pencil marks. You float past a dust lane, and it feels like passing behind a sheer curtain. Light dimmed slightly, then it brightens again. You float past a star nursery, a region where gas is thicker, where new stars might be forming quietly inside a cloud. You don't hear it. You simply imagine the slow gathering, the gentle warming, the calm birth of a new light. You float past older stars too, steady and patient, shining like small lamps that have been on for a long time. They don't flicker with urgency. They just glow. And somewhere in the distance you sense the centre of the galaxy, not as a place you must reach, but as a quiet reference point, like the centre of a carousel that turns smoothly, holding the motion together. As you drift, you can repeat the core idea in the simplest way. The galaxy writes with light. The galaxy writes with shadow. The galaxy writes with motion. Light, shadow, motion. Light, shadow, motion. If you forget the words, you can keep the rhythm. It's enough. And now, if you like, let your mind ask a soft question, not to solve, just to wonder. What patterns have been holding you unnoticed in your own life? What feels like starlight in your day? What feels like a dust lane, a soft veil, something that dims and hides? What feels like motion, a slow path you've been travelling? You don't need answers. You can let the questions dissolve like mist. The Milky Way does not demand answers from you. It simply exists, writing and rewriting quietly while you rest. Take one more slow breath in, and let it out. And if sleep is close now, you can let it arrive. Let it arrive the way the galaxy turns, slowly, gently, without any need for you to do anything at all. If you're still awake, you can let your attention come back in the gentlest way, like turning your face toward a pillow and finding it already warm. And if you're not fully awake, that's perfect too. You don't need sharp focus here. You can listen the way you listen to distant rain, catching a few soft ideas and letting the rest become comfort. A moment ago, we left the Milky Way turning quietly above you, writing its story in light, shadow and motion. And now, without changing that calm mood, we can ask a simple question. How do we read a story that is so large when we're standing inside it? If you were inside a forest, you could learn about it in many ways. You could look at the leaves, you could smell the air, you could notice the way light falls through branches, you could listen to how the wind moves. You could even touch the bark and feel its roughness. In space, we don't have bark to touch, but we do have something just as useful. We have light. And not only the kind of light your eyes see. Light is like a language the universe speaks in many accents. Your eyes hear one accent. But there are others. There are softer, deeper, longer kinds of light that carry information too. When you look at the Milky Way with your eyes, you see a bright band and dark lanes. That's already a story. It tells you there are many stars, there is dust, and the dust makes shadows. But dust also hides things. It acts like a curtain. And sometimes the best way to see through a curtain is not to stare harder, but to change the kind of light you use. So scientists listen to the galaxy with more than one lamp, more than one ear. One kind of light that helps is infrared, which simply means light that is like gentle heat glow. It's the kind of light you can't see but you can feel as warmth. A warm mug in your hands is glowing in infrared right now, even though your eyes don't see that glow. Infrared is useful in the Milky Way because dust doesn't block it as strongly as it blocks visible light. In simple words, infrared can slip through dusty regions more easily. It's like using a softer flashlight that can see through thin fog. So when we look toward the center of the galaxy in infrared, the view becomes less blocked. The bright crowd of stars in the middle begins to reveal itself more clearly. The heart is still far away, still calm, still hidden in some ways, but it becomes less like a rumor and more like a landscape. And there's another gentle thing about infrared. Dust that blocks visible light often warms slightly, and then it can glow in infrared. That means dust doesn't only hide. In another kind of light, dust can also reveal itself. It can show where it is, like a curtain that becomes visible when moonlight hits it at the right angle. So with infrared, we can start to map both the stars behind dust and the dust itself. We can begin to see the Milky Way's handwriting more clearly. Now there's another kind of light that's even longer and softer, like a slow hum. Radio waves. Radio waves simply mean very long light waves that can travel through dust. They're not radio music floating through space, they're a form of light, a form of information. And radio waves can be especially helpful for finding gas, because cold gas, the kind that can gather into clouds and someday become stars, often shows up in radio observations. It speaks in a quiet voice that our eyes never hear. There is even a particular radio signal from hydrogen, the simplest element that helps scientists map where hydrogen gas is spread across the galaxy. You don't need the details or the numbers, you can keep the simple picture. Hydrogen gas has a way of whispering in radio, and that whisper helps us draw a map of the Milky Way's mist. So when you combine visible light, infrared and radio, you begin to read the galaxy like a musician listening to a song with different instruments. Your eyes hear the bright melody of stars. Infrared adds the warm harmonies behind the dust and the glow of the dust itself. Radio waves add the deep, slow bass notes of cold gas spread out like mist. None of these views is the whole truth alone, but together they make a fuller picture. And this is one of the loveliest parts of science, especially at night. Science is not only about knowing more, it's also about seeing more gently. It's about realizing the universe has been speaking all along, and we were just missing some of its languages. If you want a calm analogy, imagine you're reading a book in dim light. At first, you can see only the bold words. Then you bring a warmer lamp closer, and suddenly you notice faint pencil marks in the margin. Then you tilt the page and see impressions in the paper, like hidden letters pressed into it. The page hasn't changed. Your way of looking has changed. That is what different kinds of light do for the Milky Way. They help us notice the faint marks. Now you might wonder, how can we tell where something is in a galaxy when we are inside it? That's a soft, good question. One way is by using motion. Remember how we said stars orbit the centre of the Milky Way and gas does too? Because of that, parts of the galaxy move toward us and away from us at different times, depending on where they are in their orbit. And when something moves toward you or away from you, its light changes slightly, not in a scary way, in a gentle, measurable way like a note-shifting pitch. You might have noticed this with sound. If a car passes by, the sound seems higher as it approaches and lower as it goes away. The car didn't change its engine. Your relationship to it changed. Light has a similar effect called a shift, which simply means the light's pattern moves slightly when the source is moving. Scientists can use this effect to learn how gas is moving, and from that, to learn about where it might be. Again, you don't need the technical mechanics tonight. You can hold the simple idea. Movement leaves clues. So the Milky Way's story is readable in two ways at once. It's readable in where things are, the pattern on the page, and it's readable in how things move, the flow of ink as the page turns. This is why motion felt so important earlier. Star streams, orbits, ribbons. These aren't only pretty ideas, they're part of the galaxy's memory system. They show what happened over time. Now, let's bring this back to your body and bed, because grounding helps the mind relax. You live in the Milky Way? That sounds obvious, but it can feel strangely comforting when you let it sink in. You're not looking at the Milky Way from the outside like a picture on a wall. You're inside it, like someone inside a quiet cathedral. The ceiling is far above and the patterns are vast, but you belong in the space. Your sun is one star among many. It's not in the centre. It's not at the very edge. It's in a region of the disk, moving along with everything else, following the Milky Way's slow rhythm. If you imagine the galaxy as a wide turning wheel, imagine the sun as a small point on that wheel, riding along in a steady circle like a lantern on a slow carousel. And that means your whole life, every day you've lived, has happened while you were quietly orbiting the centre of the Milky Way. Not fast enough to feel, not dramatic enough to notice, but real. There's something soothing about that kind of motion. It suggests that even when your day feels chaotic, there is a deeper background rhythm you're part of, like a slow tide beneath small waves. And then there's another calm connection, one that people often say in a dramatic way, but we can say it gently. The material in you has a long history, not as a metaphor but as a quiet fact. The elements that make up your body, like carbon and oxygen and iron, were not all made in the very beginning of the universe. Many of them were made inside stars, over long time as stars lived and changed. And later, that enriched material became part of new clouds, new systems, new planets. So in a simple, sleepy sense, you are made of material that has been through stars before, not as a mystical claim, as a calm continuity. You are part of the Milky Way's recycling, its renewal, its slow breathing. And if you've been carrying heavy thoughts tonight, this can be a soft kind of relief. You don't have to solve your whole life right now. You're a small, warm moment in a long, patient story. You can rest inside it. Now let's widen again, but keep it gentle. The Milky Way's spiral shape is a pattern at a huge scale, but spirals appear in small places too. If you've ever looked closely at a shell, you've seen a curve that turns and turns, unfolding smoothly. If you've watched cream swirl into tea, you've seen a spiral form and fade. If you've seen a storm from above, you've seen a turning shape of a spiral of clouds. Spirals are not magic. They are often what happens when something rotates and spreads at the same time. Motion and expansion working together. And the reason this matters is not to make you memorize anything. It's to soothe you with the idea that nature has favorite ways of organizing itself. Nature doesn't invent a completely new rule for every situation. It reuses patterns that work. So when you imagine the Milky Way, you can imagine it as one more instance of a pattern you've seen in everyday life, just stretched to a size that makes it feel like a dream. This helps the mind relax because the unfamiliar becomes familiar. A galaxy becomes a larger version of a whirlpool. A spiral arm becomes a larger version of cream curling in a cup. A dust lane becomes a larger version of shadow in a sunbeam. And suddenly the Milky Way is not a distant, unreachable thing. It is a cousin of the patterns you already know. Now, on the quiet edge of what we know, there is also that gentle mystery we mentioned, and we can hold it softly again. Dark matter. Dark matter simply means something we don't see directly, but we notice its pull through gravity. Think of it like this. If you watched leaves floating on a pond, you might infer the direction of the current even if you couldn't see the water moving. The leaves trace the hidden flow. In galaxies, stars trace the hidden pull. Their motion suggests there is more gravity than the visible stars and gas alone can provide. So dark matter is a name for that extra pull, that unseen influence. And science is still exploring what it is. That exploration is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of honesty. It's the universe reminding us that some pages are still being turned. If you're the kind of person who gets anxious when there are unknowns, you can try a different feeling tonight. Unknown can be peaceful. Unknown can mean the story continues. Unknown can mean you don't have to finish everything right now. You can leave a bookmark and go to sleep. Now, let's begin to let the language soften and slow, because we're entering a more dreamy phase. You can imagine the Milky Way again as a page. Not a crisp white page, a dark page, a night page. And on it, there are three kinds of marks: light, shadow, motion. Light is the bright print, the star glow, the clustered shimmer. Shadow is the soft handwriting in the margins, dust lanes drifting across the bright band. Motion is the invisible punctuation, the gentle turn of the page, the way stars travel in long orbits, the way streams arc like ribbons. Light, shadow, motion. You can say it quietly in your mind if you want, like a lullaby phrase. Light, shadow, motion. Now imagine you are drifting along a spiral arm again, not racing, not travelling with effort, just floating. You pass by a bright region where young stars sparkle, and the light feels slightly whiter, slightly sharper, like fresh snow under moonlight. Then you drift into a darker lane where dust makes the glow softer. The stars behind the dust become faint, like lamps seen through a thin curtain. Then you come to a cloud region, a place where gas is thicker. Not thick like fog you can breathe, but thick in the galaxy's sense, where there is more material gathered, more potential. A star nursery, a quiet beginning place. You don't need to see the forming stars clearly. You can just sense the idea of slow gathering, the way gravity invites material inward, the way warmth grows at the center, the way a new light learns to shine. Then you drift onward. You notice older stars too, steady and calm like lamps that have been on all evening. You notice that the galaxy is made of many ages at once, layered together like tree rings. And somewhere in the distance you sense the center again, not as a destination, but as a reference point, like the center of a turning wheel. Behind dust, behind glow, behind the busy crowd, there is a quiet anchor of gravity holding the dance together. You are safe, very far away from that center, held by your bin, held by the earth, held by the simple fact that you're allowed to rest. Now, let the words become simpler. The Milky Way is a home of stars. It is a home of clouds. It is a home of dust, making soft shadows. It turns slowly. It writes quietly. Light, shadow, motion. Light, shadow, motion. If you're still awake, you can let yourself wonder one more time, very gently. What would it feel like if your thoughts were as slow as the galaxy? What would it feel like if you didn't have to push them anywhere? What would it feel like if you could simply let them orbit softly and then fade? You don't have to answer. You can let the questions dissolve. Now take a slow breath in and let it out. And as you breathe out, imagine you're exhaling one more pebble, one more small weight you didn't need to carry into sleep. In the next stretch of this night, we'll stay with this drifting feeling, and we'll keep returning to the same calm ideas in slightly different words, like waves returning to shore. We'll let the Milky Way's story become less about facts and more about rhythm, until your mind has something smooth and steady to float on. For now, you can rest. You can listen. And if sleep comes, you can let it come quietly, the way the Milky Way writes. Without hurry, without pressure, just softly and safely into the dark. If you're still awake, you can let the last few sentences fade behind you, the way a boat's wake smooths out on calm water. And if you're not fully awake, if the words feel like they're passing through you instead of landing, that's exactly the right direction. Tonight, we've been reading a story that doesn't use sound. A story written inside the Milky Way, and the more gently you hold it, the clearer it can feel. Not clearer like a textbook, clearer like a feeling, like recognizing a familiar pattern in the dark. So let's settle into the simplest thread one more time, and then let it become even softer. The Milky Way is our galaxy, which simply means a huge family of stars, gas and dust, held together by gravity. Gravity, which simply means a gentle pull that brings things together, shapes the whole family's motion. And from inside this family, from our spot in the spiral disk, we see the galaxy as a pale band across the night sky because we're looking through a crowded direction full of distant starlight. That's the basic picture. Now the story part. The Milky Way leaves clues about itself. It writes those clues in a few calm ways. It writes in light, the glow of stars. It writes in shadow, where dust makes dark lanes across the bright band. And it writes in motion, the slow paths stars follow, and the ribbons they can form when they travel in related groups. Light, shadow, motion. Light, shadow, motion. You can let those three words become a rocking rhythm, like slow breathing. Light on the inhale, shadow on the pause, motion on the exhale, and then again light, shadow, motion. Now, because this is a bedtime story told by science, there's a gentle comfort in how it all fits. A galaxy is not random noise. It's not a scatter of unrelated sparkles. It's a system, a pattern, a patient kind of order. Even the things that seem messy at first, like dust lanes and drifting clouds, are part of the way the galaxy organizes itself over a very long time. And tonight, you don't have to organize anything. You can let the galaxy do the organizing in your imagination. You can let your mind be the sky and let the patterns simply appear. If you'd like, bring back that calm scene again. You're somewhere quiet. A hill, a balcony, a field, a beach at night. The air feels cool and the world feels softer at the edges. The Milky Way is overhead like pale smoke on dark velvet. Not sharp, not loud, just there. And in that band, you can almost feel the layers. A bright haze of countless distant stars. Dark lanes where dust sits in the way. making shadows like pencil strokes. And deeper still, clouds of gas, thin and wide, the raw material for new light, a galaxy keeping its memories like a landscape keeps its shape. Now, if you remember one idea from earlier, let it be this calm one. The Milky Way doesn't only contain stars, it also contains time. Not time as a ticking clock, but time as layers. Young stars that haven't drifted far from their birth clouds. Older stars that have had time to wander, to spread, to settle into calmer regions. And when stars move, they can leave patterns behind. Like footprints, like ribbons, like soft trails. Those trails are part of how we know the Milky Way has a history. Not just a look, but a past. And if you feel your own past tugging at you tonight, if memories or worries are trying to replay, you can place them gently beside this larger, slower past. Your mind can rest when it remembers that everything changes slowly in the background, even when it feels intense up close. Now let's drift through the Milky Way again, but more slowly and more dreamily, as if we're walking through a quiet gallery. Imagine you're floating along one of the spiral arms. A spiral arm is not a solid road. It is a region where stars and gas tend to gather more often, like a neighbourhood where lights are a bit closer together. You pass a bright patch where young stars are shining. Their light feels crisp in your mind like cool moonlight. Then you pass into a dust lane, a darker streak where the glow is softened. The dust is not a threat. It's simply a veil, a curtain that tells you gently that material is here. Dust is one of the galaxy's favourite ways to leave handwriting on the page. And behind the dust, you sense the possibility of clouds. Gas clouds, which simply means wide regions filled with thin space material, mostly hydrogen, spread out like mist. Hydrogen, which is simply the lightest building block, the simplest kind of atom. You don't have to picture atoms, you can picture mist. You can picture a faint fog that is too thin to see clearly, but thick enough to matter over long distances. In some places, gravity gathers that mist. It nudges it closer together, and over time a dense patch forms, like fog thickening in a dip of valley. That's where starbirth begins. Not as a bang, not as a sudden flash, but as slow gathering. A star begins as a cloud learning how to hold itself. Gravity pulls inward, warmth and pressure build inside, and eventually a steady glow appears. A new lamp in the galaxy's city of lights, a new sentence in the silent story. If you like a soothing metaphor, you can imagine starbirth as the moment a dark room becomes gently lit. Not all at once, but gradually, as someone turns a dimmer switch with care. And after a star is born, it doesn't just sit there like a decoration. It lives, shines steadily for a long time, and its colour can hint at its nature. Blue-white stars are hotter, red stars are cooler. Not cold, just cooler compared to the hotter ones. Colour is a clue, a quiet clue, another kind of handwriting. And over long time, stars move. They orbit the centre of the galaxy in wide paths like boats moving along a gentle current. Sometimes stars born together stay related in their motion. They can stretch out into long ribbons called star streams, which simply means thin groups of stars travelling together like a strand of memory, a footprint in space. So the Milky Way story isn't only written in where things are, it's written in how they move. Motion is the punctuation of the galaxy. It tells you what happened over time, it tells you who travelled together, it tells you where gravity has shaped paths, and where the galaxy has gently gathered and rearranged its own material. And in the middle, behind dust, there is the crowded heart, a region with many stars, a region where many paths curve around a common centre, and at that centre, a quiet gravitational anchor, a black hole, which simply means a place where gravity is so strong that light cannot easily escape from very close to it. Far away, gravity behaves like gravity, steady, predictable, not dramatic, not personal, and you are far away. You're safe. You are held by your bed, held by the earth, held by the simple fact that this is a story you can fall asleep to if you've been listening carefully. You may notice that all of these ideas have something in common. They are all gentle ways of seeing. None of them demand that you imagine violence. None of them require fear. They are invitations to notice patterns, to let the universe be wide and calm, to let your mind be wide and calm too. Now, since this is the final stretch of our night, we can let the science become even simpler, even more rhythmic, as if we're letting the story turn into a lullaby. We can also give your mind a quiet place to rest by repeating the core ideas, not as a lesson, but as a soothing refrain. The Milky Way is a home of stars. The Milky Way is a home of clouds. The Milky Way is a home of dust, making soft shadows. The Milky Way turns slowly. The Milky Way remembers light, shadow, motion. Light, shadow, motion. If you're still awake, you might enjoy one more calm layer, one more gentle way the story connects to your life. Because you are not only looking at the Milky Way, you are inside it, you are moving with it. Every day you have ever lived, your whole life has happened, while you are quietly orbiting the galaxy's centre with this fast enough to feel, not obvious enough to notice, but real, a background motion, a slow tide beneath the small waves, and the material in you has a long history. Many of the ingredients in your body were formed in earlier stars, long before the sun existed. That means you are, in a calm and literal way, made of old starlight's leftovers. Not as a dramatic line, as a quiet truth. You are part of the Milky Way's long cycle, its slow recycling and renewal. That can be comforting. It can make the night feel less lonely. It can make your worries feel smaller without dismissing them. Because in a larger rhythm you are held. You're included. You belong. Now, if your mind likes to search for certainty, there's one more gentle idea we can place at the edge like a soft bookmark. There are things we still wonder about. One of them is dark matter, which simply means something we don't see directly, but we notice its pull through gravity. It's a quiet unknown. Not spooky, not threatening, just incomplete knowledge, like a page that hasn't been read yet. Science can be peaceful like that. It can say calmly, "This is what we know," and then gently, "And here is what we still wonder." You don't have to solve the wonder. You can let it rest. Unknown is allowed. Unknown can be soft. Unknown can be a place to set down your thinking and go to sleep. Now we'll begin the drift phase fully. The drift phase is where the language becomes simpler, where ideas repeat, where the rhythm matters more than the information, where your mind can float and your body can settle deeper. So imagine again that you're walking through the Milky Way's story as if it were a hallway lined with soft lights. You don't need to walk quickly. You don't need to reach the end. You can simply move at the pace of breath. You step into the first quiet room and it is filled with starlight. Not harsh light, a soft glow. Countless distant suns blending into a milky haze. Light. Then you step into the next quiet room and the light is crossed by shadows, dust lanes, soft veils, dark strokes like pencil marks on a page, shadow. Then you step into the next room and you feel motion even if you don't see it. Stars drifting in wide orbits, ribbons of stars stretching into streams, the slow turning of a galaxy, like a wheel that takes forever to complete a single rotation. Motion, and then again, light, shadow, motion. As you move through these rooms, each one becomes simpler. The details blur, the feeling stays. Light, shadow, motion. Light, shadow, motion. If your thoughts are still busy, you can give them this gentle job. Let them imagine the Milky Way as a living map. A map made of glow and darkness. A map where bright regions hint at many stars. where dark lanes hint at dust, where misty regions hint at gas clouds, where patterns of motion hint at old journeys. A quiet map that doesn't demand anything from you. A map you can look at with your eyes closed. Now imagine drifting along a spiral arm again. You float past a bright cluster, then a softer patch, then a dark lane, then a faint cloud, and everything is slow. Everything is gentle. In your mind, the galaxy turns like a slow carousel, and you're not running, you're resting. You're allowed to be small inside something vast. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to let go. Light, shadow, motion, light, shadow, motion. Now, let's add a small breath cue, because breath is the easiest rhythm to follow. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. On the inhale, imagine starlight. On the exhale, imagine dust shadows softening the brightness. In the pause, imagine motion, the slow orbit, the patient turn, light, shadow, motion. Now, if you want a gentle question to fade into, you can let these questions arrive like quiet snow and then melt away. What patterns have been holding you unnoticed? What has been quietly repeating in your days like a soft orbit? What feels like starlight in you, steady and warm? What feels like a dust lane, a gentle veil, a softness that hides and protects? What feels like motion, a slow path you've been traveling? You don't need answers. Questions can be bedtime music. They can drift through you and dissolve. You can let them go. You can let your mind become the night sky, wide and unbothered. Now, one more slow, dreamy recap like waves returning to shore. The Milky Way is a galaxy, a family of stars. It has a gentle wig, like a slow pinwheel. It has dust, making soft shadow lanes across its glow. It has gas clouds, thin, misty material that can gather into new stars. It has motion, wide orbits and quiet ribbons. It has a crowded heart, partly hidden, anchored by gravity. And it has mysteries at the edges, calm unknowns that invite wonder without pressure. Light, shadow, motion. Light, shadow, motion. If you're falling asleep, the words may begin to separate from meaning. That's okay, meaning is not your job right now. Rest is, let the voice become a soft presence. Let the galaxy become a soft image. Let your body sink into the bed as if the bed is a gentle planet holding you close. Feel the weight of your blanket. Feel the calm in your chest. Feel the way your face relaxes when you stop trying to hold anything. And if a thought arrives, you don't have to fight it. You can let it pass by like a small satellite crossing a wide sky. You can notice it and let it move on. Thoughts are like stars in a way. They appear, they drift, they fade, and you remain safe, held. Now, let the last visualization be even simpler. A dark page, a pale band, a few soft shadows, a slow turning, that's all. A dark page and a pale band, soft shadows, slow turning. Light, shadow, motion, light, shadow, motion. And as you listen, you can let the spaces between the words grow larger. You can let silence do more of the work. You can let your breathing become the main sound, in and out, in and out. If you're still awake, you can gently remember this. You don't need to carry the whole universe, you don't need to understand everything tonight. You only need to rest. The Milky Way will keep turning whether you watch it or not. Its story will keep writing itself quietly in the dark, and you're allowed to close your eyes and let your own story pause for a while. So here, near the end, let's offer a soft good night that doesn't snap the night in half. Just a fade. Just a quiet easing away. May your thoughts grow light, and may the night hold you gently. And if you drift now, drift the way the galaxy turns. Slowly, softly, without hurry, without effort, just safely deeper and deeper into rest.